Welcome to the Boris Continuum Complete for Vegas Pro training series. I'm John Rofrano for Boris TV, and in this episode, we're going to take a look at the 3D object extruded text. In particular, we're going to focus on the text properties, the render properties, and the extrusion properties in extruded text. We're going to create a little logo that kind of looks like wood blocks for this Western Woods company. I'm going to start by creating a new project. And then I'm going to insert a video track, and right after that, insert an empty event. If you're familiar with After Effects at all, and you're used to creating a comp and then inserting a solid, an empty event in Vegas is similar to a solid in After Effects. Then we will apply the Boris Continuum Complete 3D Object Extruded Text to this. You'll notice that I've arranged my BCC plugins in folders within the Effects plugin chooser. Vegas allows you to create folders, and I recommend that you do categorize them by the folders that they normally come in. We're going to select the BCC Extruded Text, click Add, and then click OK. We could have also double-clicked on it. There's several ways of getting these applied. And this will apply extruded text to this empty event. So the first thing we want to do is launch the text window. I'll press the Launch Text Window button, and up will come the text editor. Now, if you're familiar with Boris Red or Graffiti or Blue, the other Boris products, this would look familiar to you. This is where you enter in your text. So I'm going to type in Western, all in caps, so I want them to be big blocks, wood works, and actually I should have hit enter instead of space there because I want them on 2 lines. Now I can select any one of these, a word, a character, and just change the font on any one thing. Whatever's selected, that's what gets changed, just like if you were in a word processor. So we'll select them all and just go through a couple of fonts. I'm using the down arrow here to go through them. You can also use the up and down next and previous font button here. And so I know that I want to use Arial Black on this because it's a nice solid looking font that'll look like a block of wood. The next thing I want to do is pick the size, and I want to take something, just something above 100 to give the extruder enough information to work with. So larger fonts do work better. You can always scale them back later. And you can also use these buttons to make a font larger and smaller. So that'll go up one size and down a size. As you'd expect, there are buttons for bold and italics, but things like italics don't work with fonts like Arial Blacks. It has no italics. But don't worry, Boris has you covered there because it has a style skew in the X and in the Y. And so if you skew in the X just a little, you get italic text out of any font. And you can also skew in the Y, and it gives you this kind of barn door swinging effect. We're not going to use either of those today because we want our blocks to look nice, like nice square chunky blocks. But I just wanted to show you that that does work. The next down here is tracking, and tracking is the space between all of the letters at once. So it's just your general spacing. We'll set that back to 0. Then you can do kerning on individual letters. So if there were letters that were too close, you would place the cursor between 2 letters. Let's say we thought this R was too close to the N. We can take and adjust the kerning. I can do that by typing in this box. I can drag on this box and adjust the kerning. I can drag over on the slider and adjust the kerning. And I can also adjust the kerning by going through with Alt arrow key and adjusting each one separately. So however you like doing your kerning, Boris will allow you to do it. Then there is the leading. And again, I want to select both of these lines to show you the leading. So let me move over here. And the leading is the space between the 2 lines. So if we make it smaller, they'll get closer, and larger, they'll get further away. Leading was taken right from the days of the printing press when they actually used to put lead in between the lines of text, and the amount of lead they used was called the leading. So that's what helps me remember it. Then there's the baseline. The baseline is what the text is aligned to. Usually it is at the base of the text, but you can move it up and down. And adjust the baseline, and then you can adjust the scale in the X, and you could adjust the scale in the Y. So if you wanted really tall blocks, we could make these very tall blocks as well. I'm going to reset these back to their defaults, which was 0, 100, and 100. The other options you have are justification. So you have left justify, center justify, and right justify. but we're going to use something called fill justify. If you noticed on my blocks in the example, the Western was just as spread out as the woodwork. So by hitting the fill justify button, it makes Western and woodworks fill out the same amount of space, and that always looks good on logos, or mostly looks good on logos. The next tab here allows you to do word wrap. You can decide if you have multiple words, you can let them wrap. And this tab here is kind of neat because it controls the fill style and the border style. Well, let me apply these so you can see how it works to begin with. I'll just apply this and Boris will create the geometry. So there you see I've got solid blocks. Then I'll launch my text window again, and this time I'm going to turn my border style on and I'm going to turn my fill style off and then apply again. And you'll see that it will fill in, it will take the center out of these letters. And you'll just get the border of these letters. So probably something strange with the W in this particular font, but normally it would pull the middle out of all the letters. So let's go back and change this back again. And we'll click apply. Now the next thing I want to show you are the render settings, but before I do, I need to align this text so that you can see it a little better. So I'm going to go down to transformations, and we're going to cover transformations in another episode, but I just want to change the rotation of the text slightly, and I want to change the scale so we get closer to it, and I want to change the position so that I can see these. Just one line of text a little bit easier. It'll help me explain some of these things to you. Okay, I also want to just quickly apply a material because I want you to see some of the effects that are going to happen when we play with extrusion and render. Okay, so the first one here is polygon count, and polygon count determines how many polygons are used to render these letters. And as you change things like the extrusion, and let me go change the extrusion for a moment, just to show you. I'm going to change this to convex for a moment. You'll see there is all sorts of polygons going on inside these O's. You can see the lines and the lines and the D. And so if I take the polygon count and I move it up a bit, those will start to disappear. See, they're gone from the D, they're smoothed out on the O. The idea here is to work in kind of draft mode with a low polygon count, and then move your polygons up as you need them to do your final render. So let me go back and reset this extrusion here. But that's what the polygon count does. Anti-aliasing is for diagonal lines, so when I turn it off, you see there's lots of jaggies in these lines. On the default is better, and that usually takes care of most of them. If you see more, there's one above that called good. Smooth edges will smooth the edges between the text and the background. So I don't know if you can see right up here, the edge is maybe a little bit rough, and I click smooth edges and it smooths it right out. Transparent object, and you would probably leave these off until you're going to do your final render, and then you would decide the rendering options that you want to use. Transparent object is if you are going to have a partial transparency. So if you have total transparency where nothing's there, you don't need to use this. But if there's partial transparency, so you want to have something that looks like glass, where it's partially transparent, you kind of see through, it's more translucent. If you click transparent object, it'll tell the renderer to work more carefully on those areas to get the translucency correct. And then finally in render, there's enable motion blur. One of the dead giveaways of CGI, computer-generated graphics, is when you put it in motion, every frame is crystal clear. And when things move in the real world and they're photographed by a camera, there's a blur between the shutter speed of the camera and the movement. So what the motion blur does is it creates an artificial blur based on the motion that you've put these things through in BCC, and it will give a slight blur. You can control the shutter angle and the smoothness of that blur to give your motion a more realistic look as if it was shot with a real camera and lens. So those are the rendering properties. Now we're going to move on to extrusion. We'll talk about lighting in a future episode, but let's talk about the extrusion. I want these wood blocks to be kind of deep, and the extrusion depth is what controls that. Right now I can turn it all the way off, and you can see there's no extrusion at all. There's just the bevel and the front. And then as you move this up, the extrusion can get deeper and deeper and deeper. And as I'm going to move the position here just a little bit so you can see a little more of the There you can see the nice extrusion up above here as well. You can see that being extruded out. So I'm going to drag these out. I want them to be kind of thick. I think probably about a 15. And one of the things you can do is just type in here. So I want these to be really deep blocks. The next is the bevel style. And this is the style that you see here. This is flat bevel. And that's the straight bevel. You can also make this a convex bevel. And so it now has some nice smoothing. Of course, you can see you might need to increase the polygon count when you're using a convex bevel. And then after that is the concave bevel, which will scoop it out, if you remember your convex and concave lenses from science class. So concave kind of scoops out the bevel in there, and that kind of looks nice. That might be something you might want to use with wood. And then there's a bunch of saved presets. And the saved presets have been created by drawing splines, and you can create these actually in After Effects with BCC. But unfortunately, Vegas has no way to draw a spline, so you can't create these in Vegas. But they do give you a pretty good set. And I'm going to go down with my down arrow key and just go through them, and you can see all the different bevels that they have in there. And for my wood blocks, I want to use a bevel. There's these 3-step bevels. So yeah, that one. No, I think I like that one. That kind of looks like furniture, right? That looks like real wood. So I want to use that. So I think that's the one that I like. And then you can control the bevel amount. And the bevel amount is this slider here. You can see the bevel getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now let me do this with a. I want to do this with the convex because it's easier to see. And you can see this just puff out. Boy, these guys get like marshmallows, right? But the bevel amount controls how much bevel you will have on the object. And so I'm going to go back to my 3 steps and determine how much I want. I think maybe just a little bit more. That's good. Now there's this option called back bevel. So in order to show you that, I actually have to go back down to the transform and just rotate this around a bit. So let me rotate it. Now you can see the back, and you can see that there's no bevels on the back, and that's okay if you're going to only have it facing one way, or you want to have this up against an object, you want it to be smooth. But if you're going to spin it around in 3D space, and in our example we don't, but if you would go and check on the back bevels, and then it bevels the back as well. And so now the blocks will be beveled on both sides. Let me go back and turn this around so that we can go back to our front. Okay. The last thing to look at in extrusion is the side style. The straight is the default, but there's a bunch of saved presets, and once again, these are created from splines, and these presets will determine how the side looks. So let me go back to straight so you can look at it. We'll go back to none, and you can see, sorry, let's go back to straight, and you can see that they're just straight across, and then I go back to a saved preset, and I have dent. I'm going to down arrow again. We have embossed 2, front heavy, right? And I go through them, another front heavy. And so you can see how these different sides affect how this looks. I think we're going to keep our side straight. And that is all of the options that are in extrusion. So let's go back down and do one last thing. And that is I want to change this default gray to a nice wood texture. So I can get my, my wood here, and there's my wood texture. And then I want to finally back this off with the transform, scale it down so you can see. Here's our Western Woodworks, and in another tutorial I will show you how to animate it like you did in the opening sequence. So we've covered extruded text. We've looked at the text font properties, the render properties, and the extrusion properties. Hopefully this gave you a good overview of how to get started. And in future episodes, we'll take a look at materials and lighting and cameras. Until next time, this is John Rofrano for Boris TV. Thanks for watching.